Hello, I'm Matthew Corey. This is number 0844, the Stuff File program with Peter Anthony Holder, and it comes to you right now.
The following program is brought to you in living color.
Now, it's time for an eclectic mix of interviews and some of the oddest news stories you'll ever hear. It's the Stuff File program with Peter Anthony Holder.
Hey there, hi there, ho there! Peter Anthony Holder here with you, and yes, this is indeed another edition of the Stuff File program, number 0844. And coming up on this edition of the Stuff File program, you'll meet Rachel Corbett, who is the author of The Monsters We Make, Murder, Obsession, and the Rise of Criminal Profiling.
I don't just look at what profilers do. I'm also looking at the profilers themselves, kind of reversing the gaze, profiling the profilers, if you will, because I really wanted to understand what it is, who they are, what are the different types of profiling, when does it work, and who are the people who are doing it. Who are the people who are defining monsters, sometimes creating them, sometimes, creating them in different societies, at different places. We think of monsters differently. So they were a little bit different in Victorian England than they were in the 70s and they were now.
David Eliot is the author of Artificially Intelligent, the very human story of AI. Who exactly did he write the book for?
I found that the AI information sphere right now is so just clouded. There's just so much stuff. There's so much debris. The fog of war is here. If you go on YouTube, it's every crypto bro turned into an AI bro telling you the 10 GPT prompts you need to know. And if you go to the academic work, it's just so dense that you can't expect your everyday person to read it. So I wanted to read it for anybody who's heard the words AI or heard about these things or heard it in the news and is concerned about it or is interested in it, that this could be your starting point.
Science writer Andrew Fazekas, the Night Sky Guy, is back with several space-related stories, including the idea of Canada being a major part of putting nuclear reactors on the moon.
This could be a big game changer for future moon bases. Canada officially is exploring how the nation can contribute to the idea of having nuclear reactors. So NASA is planning to do this, and it's to power sustained human missions, they say. Canada is a perfect country to be able to do nuclear reactors because it has a long experience with that. You could just think of CANDO reactors, research reactors that they've been involved in.
And there's lots and lots of Stuff File news, dad joke theater, morning shower thoughts, and of course, an idiot of the day. The guest later, the person who told you this was show number 0844, was Matthew Corey, author of Cue Me, My Star Trek Story, and also Remember the Roller Dogs. By the way, both of his books are available on Amazon.com or Amazon.ca, and you'll find the links on the show page that he just mentioned. Thank you very much, Matthew, for doing the guest slate on this edition of the Stuff File program, a show that is listener-supported, fan-funded radio that depends on you for our success. Join us at patreon.com to help make this show an even bigger and better radio experience. Well, let's get right to the stuff. This first story deals with humans, but it plays out like an episode of Mutual of Omaha's Wild Kingdom. Many of you might be old enough to remember Marlin Perkins.
Welcome to Mutual of Omaha's Wild Kingdom.
A storage facility in Kershaw County, South Carolina, called the sheriff to report a storage unit had been looted. Several items were stolen, including a wildlife camera. The camera, which apparently also has an onboard GPS locator, was still connected to a cell phone, and the owner was able to check the camera's location. It was at a Goodwill store in Camden, and deputies headed there. The camera wasn't there, but the owner arrived, and most importantly, bringing his cell phone. The camera had uploaded photos of the apparent thief and his truck and updated its location to a house. Deputies went there and found the truck. The man in the photo, 53-year-old Kenneth Davidson, was inside his home and allegedly admitted to breaking into the storage unit. He was arrested, charged with burglary and larceny, and released after posting an $18,000 bond. But he should also be given credit for taking his own mugshot. You know, as far as the Stuff File News is concerned, it would seem that Marlon and I have the same goals.
Nature, as we have experienced it over these years, has been a treasure chest of wonders. There will always be memorable moments in the wild kingdom.
Police in Miami, Florida, were taking a report from a senior citizen for an unspecified incident when 63-year-old Marina Navarrete stopped at the location to retrieve stolen shoes. Navarrete, apparently referring to the senior citizen, asked the officer, "How much would the bond be if I smacked her?" It's unclear whether the cop had a chance to answer, but Navarrete proceeded to walk over to the victim and whacked her in the face. Navarrete was arrested, charged with aggravated battery on a person 65 or older. By the way, the answer to Navarrete's question was revealed to be $1,000, but that didn't get her sprung. She was already out on bond for charges of resisting arrest with violence and battery on a law enforcement officer, so she was ordered to be held until she could be brought before a judge. You know, when you must know the going rate for obliviousy, expect to pay double. And finally, in this section of the Stuff File News, before we get to our first guest on this edition of the Stuff File program with me, Peter Anthony Holder, Dr. Fred Ramsdell was living his best life and off the grid on a pre-planned hiking trip. Ramsdell and his wife, Laura O'Neill, were on the last day of their 3-week Montana hike when they finally got a mobile signal and found O'Neill had around 200 text messages. "You've won the Nobel Prize," she told her husband. "I did not," he replied. Yet Ramsdell and 2 other scientists had won the Nobel Prize for physiology or medicine because of their research on how the immune system attacks infections. The couple immediately drove to a nearby town so that he could get a better signal. Said Ramsdell, "By then it was probably 3 o'clock in the afternoon here. I called the Nobel Committee. Of course, they were in bed because it was probably 1 o'clock in the morning there." He was able to reach his fellow laureates and the Nobel Committee 20 hours after the initial missed call, attempting to inform him of the 11 million Swedish kroner, or $1.157 million U.S. prize. His only quote was, "So, it was an interesting day." So, maybe the best way to win a Nobel Prize is to go off the grid, go into the woods, and wait.
If it were somebody else, they would have gotten 5 Nobel Prizes. I never even got a mention.
And let's get to our first guest here in this edition of the Stuff File program, shall we? Rachel Corbett is an award-winning author and journalist. Her new book takes a fresh look at criminal profiling. It's called The Monsters We Make: Murder, Obsession, and the Rise of Criminal Profiling. Rachel joins us from Brooklyn, New York, via Riverside.com. Hi, Rachel.
Hi, how are you?
Just tickety-boo. Thanks very much for taking the time to be on the program with us. People who watch crime dramas probably think that criminal profiling has been something that was a recent invention, but it's been around for centuries, has it not?
Yeah, I think probably most people think of maybe the FBI and the Mindhunter era, thanks to that show, Mindhunter. But actually, I trace it back to the era of Jack the Ripper in Victorian England. What's commonly considered the first profile was done by a police surgeon, Thomas Bond, who started to think beyond the physical evidence he was finding at the crime scenes and from the bodies, and started thinking about what behaviors Jack the Ripper might, or what you could learn from the behaviors. What was he like as a person? How would he dress? what kind of person would he be?
Now, as I said in the introduction, your subtitle is Murder, Obsession, and the Rise of Criminal Profiling. So I would assume that even though it's been around for a while, there was a rise. When was that point? And was technology involved?
Yeah, in the 1970s was when the FBI was trying to rehabilitate its image after the J. Edgar Hoover years. Some of the new agents they brought in, particularly a guy named Howard Teeton, also wanted to look at crimes differently. He was also a forensic specialist, and he started to take psychology classes. And this is when you get the creation of the behavioral science unit at the FBI. And it was then that also at the same time Ted Bundy was on his rampage. Soon John Wayne Gacy was caught killing people. And so the FBI seized on this moment as kind of an epidemic of serial murder and then brought out into the public its special psycho squad, they called it. It's elite crime fighters who could get into the minds of murderers. And so that's when it really was brought to big public attention.
At that time, was it something that was embraced by everyone in the department? Certainly the, shall we say, older agents in the department, or was this kind of new age voodoo in some cases to some people?
Yeah, voodoo is actually exactly the word some people use to describe what was happening, way underground where they were stationed, in the basement of the academy. It was definitely not accepted. There was only a few guys on the original unit, and eventually what happened was the FBI started bringing them out in public and putting them in front of the press and showing this very terrified public that these guys could do something nobody else could do. And suddenly public perception changed. Suddenly, not just of the behavioral science unit, but also of the FBI. And with that, they were able to expand their jurisdiction. They got a lot more funding from Congress to create new programs around profiling. So it started to become something kind of, almost sexy in the public eye.
The first part of your title for the book, before the subtitle, is The Monsters We Make. What do you mean by that?
So I don't just look at what profilers do. I'm also looking at the profilers themselves, kind of reversing the gaze, profiling the profilers, if you will, because I really wanted to understand what it is, who they are, what are the different types of profiling, when does it work, and who are the people who are doing it? Who are the people who are defining monsters, sometimes creating them, sometimes, creating them in different societies at different places. We think of monsters differently. So, they were a little bit different in Victorian England than they were in the 70s and they were now. So when I think of making them, I mean sort of making them in the popular culture. And there's also some instances like in the contemporary period where we're using predictive policing, and sometimes it gets things wrong and can put people into the criminal justice system who probably shouldn't have been there to begin with.
When you say it can go wrong, is part of the problem that maybe some profilers have a bias?
It can be that. I mean, it's not even necessarily individual profilers. I think, for example, with the predictive policing, they're using data that's often, sometimes 50 years old. Maybe it comes from an era when policing was different. They used to stop Black Americans from marijuana 4 times the rate of white Americans, even for the same usage on both sides. So things like that. So you would start policing those neighborhoods more, and then you'd be arresting those people more. And that's how it creates kind of a bias in the system. And, of course, you have occasionally, a bad actor. But I think it's more kind of looking at what profiling can get wrong when we try to target who among us is a criminal, or even worse, who's going to become a criminal.
That brings up a very interesting point. Who's going to become a criminal? Can one predict, should one predict, whether someone has criminal intent, even though they may not be a criminal now?
Yeah, I think that's very dangerous territory. And we do that with predictive policing now, but we have been doing it for forever. We did it back in the 1700s even, when they started creating the idea of phrenology and physiognomy so that you could tell by somebody's face and the lumps in their skull who was going to become a criminal, who's a born criminal. And that is, of course, led to really terrible things, false convictions. And now we don't do it by look, but we are still doing it in ways that can be dangerous.
I guess you could say that maybe even the witch hunts were part of criminal profiling.
Yeah, and that's also an example of the making of monsters too. When we, in puritanical times, it was often women who were very poor, maybe they were widowed. They weren't in the mainstream who were targeted as witches. And that's what the society kind of wanted or needed at that point to reaffirm the boundaries between sort of good Puritanism and sort of other people. And so by making them into monsters, witches, that's what they were able to do.
What led you to this topic and writing the book, The Monsters We Make?
Well, so I write in the book, I have a personal story where someone I knew, a father figure actually, when I was a child, from what I knew, a very kind man, a man I loved very much growing up, he ended up murdering somebody out of the blue, completely. He was never violent. There was no signs of this. And I became, years later when I found that out, I didn't know when I was a child, but I found out later, I became rather obsessed with figuring out what happened, what was in this guy's mind. It was so unbelievable to me. So I really investigated. I kind of became a profiler myself, looking at his early childhood, his formative traumas, what were the statistics on what kind of people commit this crime. And I ended up coming up feeling, I just still don't understand it. I have the data that tells me this and that, but it's so hard to understand that. And I realize that's a feeling a lot of us have. There's so many shows about profiling because I think we just have this urge to know the ineffable, the unbelievable roots of how somebody could kill.
I'm just curious from your point of view, because you're also an award-winning author and journalist, and I'm just wondering how much profiling goes into journalism in your case.
Well, that's an interesting question. I mean, certainly we write profiles in terms of magazine profiles of a subject, which is also just one person's perspective on another person. So, you see the profiles, like in a magazine, is, it tells you as much about the person writing it as it does the profile, if you think about it in a certain way. What the writer chooses to put in or leave out, that in a way is similar, I think, because in profiling of criminals, it's a lot of times subjective based on what the profiler, what they're thinking about this person or what they've seen in the past that shapes how they're going to imagine who this murderer is. They're very different disciplines, but there are similarities, I think.
I guess what I'm asking too is how similar do you feel an FBI profiler is to a journalist to a certain degree?
Oh, well, I mean, we're both investigators a lot of times. I certainly felt like when I was writing this story about Scott that I was investigating him and the crime scene. I think that that's probably the main similarity. We both try to understand, get in the minds of our subjects, certainly, figure out what's motivating them, how they think, what their interests are. I suppose that's all connected too.
Well, it's an interesting topic. When you first started writing this, who did you think your reader would be?
Well, I hope, I think that people who love true crime can definitely find a lot in this book. It covers a lot of the, it has new information on Ted Kaczynski and a different way of viewing some of the biggest, serial killer cases in our history. But I also think that there's something else for kind of a more someone who's thinking about the criminal justice system and policing. It's kind of a history of how those things go together and shape fears in our society. So I think it's both for the true crime person, but also someone who's maybe just interested in crime as a social phenomenon and criminal justice as part of that too.
The book is called The Monsters We Make: Murder, Obsession, and the Rise of Criminal Profiling. Rachel, thank you very much for taking the time to be on the program with us.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
Rachel Corbett, author of The Monsters We Make, Murder, Obsession, and the Rise of Criminal Profiling. You can go to our website at thestuffile.com, check out the show number for this program, which is show number 0844, and you'll find the link to Rachel's website, plus links to either Amazon.com or Amazon.ca, where you can order her book directly. You're listening to the Stuff File program with me, Peter Anthony Holder.
And now, Dad Joke Theater.
I can tell that you're lying just by looking at you. I can also tell when you're standing.
Join us again for another Stuff File program, Dad Joke Theater.
There's still more guests, more news, and an idiot of the day coming your way on the Stuff File program. Stay tuned. The Stuff File program is a listener-supported, fan-funded radio show that depends on you for our success. Join us at patreon.com to help make this show an even bigger and better radio experience. Sign up and find out about our rewards program. Being a patron doesn't have to be a long-term commitment. There's absolutely no obligation. You could join today and end whenever you'd like. But the time we have your support would be so greatly appreciated. We'd also love to hear your thoughts about the show and even your ideas for rewards. Join us for the ride. Join us at patreon.com/thestuffileprogram.
I'm standing tall for Canada. Hello, bonjour, this is Andy Kim. I am honored to be part of this beautiful country where people often find the impossible possible. We stand together and fight for each other, supporting Canadian businesses, buying Canadian products, protecting Canadian jobs. Shop as if your country depends on it. Keep your money in Canada for Canada.
Available on Amazon Music, iHeartRadio, Spotify, and just about every other way you stream audio. This is the Stuff File program with Peter Anthony Holder. It's radio that's everywhere you want to be, and some places you don't.
And still to come on the program, we will talk to the author of Artificially Intelligent. Also, Andrew Fazekas, the Night Sky Guy, will be back on the show to talk about many things, including Blue Origin's next mission. We also have a morning shower thought, and of course an idiot of the day, and much more in Stuff File news right here, right now. There's a great company out there called Shipt. What do they do?
Meet Shipt. Shipt is a same-day service that offers delivery of your brand to consumers in as little as 1 hour. We have a US-based 24/7 customer support team, and we have over a 96% customer satisfaction rate.
That's a great satisfaction rate. Not to be a Debbie Downer, but let's talk about that 4%, shall we? On August 18th, officers received reports that 25-year-old Kang Hu Huang, a Shipt delivery driver, was reportedly marking packages coming from a Minneapolis Target as delivered that were never received by the purchasers. In one incident, a Target employee had bought a vacuum cleaner, which was then marked as delivered but never received. The employee then got surveillance footage, which allegedly showed Huang delivering the vacuum, taking a picture of it to verify the delivery, then taking the vacuum and leaving. Target was then notified by a staff member at an apartment building in Minneapolis about a large amount of empty Target shipping boxes in the building's garbage. Many of the boxes had different addresses throughout the Twin Cities, and yes, Huang was the Shipt delivery driver for all of those packages. All those packages were marked as delivered but reported missing by customers. The items in the empty boxes found at the apartment building were worth at least $5,337.53, and Huang was the delivery driver for about $16,541.69 worth of items that were never delivered to customers. Huang was a resident at the apartment building where the empty Target boxes were found, and he was seen on camera disposing of the boxes at least 27 times. During a search warrant, officers found over $6,000 of the stolen items. Well, the irony of this story is that where Huang is going, he'll have to get everything delivered. And a court filing has put some meat on the bones of a case against a corrections officer just arrested for allegedly smuggling chicken wings into a Texas lockup. According to court papers filed October 16th, a Travis County jail official was monitoring an inmate's phone calls on an unrelated incident when the man told a relative that a corrections officer had provided him with chicken wings after he sent the officer money on Cash App. Specifically, the inmate said that the officer had agreed to supply him with habanero mango chicken wings from Wingstop in return for $50.
At Wingstop, we don't just make wings. We make wings worth obsessing over.
A subsequent review of jail surveillance video showed a food delivery arriving at the Travis County Correctional Complex, a 2,300-inmate campus in suburban Austin. After the paper bag was run through an X-ray scanner, 25-year-old Amos Nyanway picks up the bag and eats some of the wings himself. Nyanway then takes several chicken wings from the bag, places them on paper towels, and hands them to an inmate. And the inmate walks away with the chicken wings and eats them. Court filings could not identify the inmate or why an officer with the jail's Security Threat Intelligence Unit was monitoring his calls. Investigators had obtained a search warrant for Cash App data to determine the extent of Nyanway's involvement in bringing in contraband and to assist in identifying other incidents. Nyanway was busted on a misdemeanor contraband charge, citing Texas Penal Code 38.114. An arrest affidavit notes that chicken wings are not provided or authorized to be provided to inmates. Wow. To go to all that trouble, those wings must be completely irresistible.
Make it irresistible. Wingstop, the wing experts.
And let's get to our next guest here on this edition of the Stuff File program with me, Peter Anthony Holder. David Eliot researches the social and political effects of artificial intelligence. He's the author of the book, Artificially Intelligent, The Very Human Story of AI. David joins us from right here in Montreal via riverside.com. Hi, David.
Hey, Peter. Thank you so much for having me here today.
Thanks for being on the program with us. Now, how did you come up with this idea of the book? And I know you study artificial intelligence. So what is it you're trying to tell the rest of us who are either really excited about AI or are afraid of AI? What is it you want to depart with us?
Yeah, so I think there's really two things there. And the first is I've come to recognize that my perspective on AI is a bit more unique than other people because I don't have a doom and gloom, it's going to end the world, or a, super optimistic, like this is going to change everything. We're going to live in a utopia. I really think that AI is a very human technology, and it will change everything. There will be massive changes, but that the changes it's going to make and how it will affect our society are up to us. And it's up to us, especially in these next 10 years, to make the decisions that will affect generations to come. So what I wanted to do is write a book that would help your everyday Joe. I wrote it really at the beginning for my friends to help them understand AI, all the basics that they needed to know, all the ways that it affects society, its technological functioning, so that they could join in on this conversation, so that they could learn about AI and not be afraid of it, but feel like they can actually have a voice in the decisions that we're making right now.
Well, you say it's up to us. So the us you're referring to, is that the scientific community or the lay person?
Yeah, so this is the exact argument I make in the book, is that right now it's being left up to the scientific community to the technologists, the ones who understand this technology. And I don't think that's right, because it is a technology that's going to change everything and affect everything. If we let just the scientists and the people who invented this technology make the decisions, we're kind of giving up our sovereignty on the type of world we want to see. So I think it should be up to the lay people. I think we need to, in a sense, take back that power and demand the world we want to see. But to do that, we need to understand AI. So that's like a very difficult task, which is why I, as an AI researcher, wanted to write this book in a way that's accessible to your layperson. I wanted to make it fun and enjoyable and not feel like reading a technical manual, so that more people can join this conversation and start advocating for themselves and their communities, because no one knows how AI is going to affect your job, your community better than you.
Well, first of all, you are an AI researcher. What exactly does that entail, and how does one become an AI researcher?
Yeah, so I'm likely not what you think of when you think of an AI researcher. I'm not hunched over a computer programming code. I don't make the devices or the machines myself. My job is to research the social effects of AI. So I've been doing this since 2019. So a major point of this is understanding the technology, how it works, but then looking at how it's being implemented into our society and the broader effects that that has. So I kind of have that moniker of AI researcher because that's my research area. That's my main focus. I just look at AI, but my job is to understand the social structures, whether they be political, economic, legal, and understand the changes that this curveball that's been thrown into our society is making in these areas. So I can give recommendations to politicians. I can help us understand new economic formations we might be building. So that's really what my job is. And there's a million different ways into it and into the AI field. Mine was purely by accident of that I was working in another area and I stumbled upon, at the time, a program they just said could write like a human. And that was 2019, and it turned out what I discovered was the GPT project, when they were still at the beginning of GPT-2, I think it was. And that would eventually become ChatGPT. So I always say I was not ahead of the curve. I just got lucky enough to see ChatGPT 3 years ahead of everybody else, and said the same thing everybody else did of, this is going to change everything, and dedicated my life to researching this topic.
How do you get past the fear that a lot of people have? I mean, just before I started this interview, I happened to get a ping in my email address from a newsletter that I get on a regular basis. It was from the Hollywood community, and the headline was OpenAI's Sora, talking about how a lot of Hollywood is really against this idea, their generative video model, and it's sending a lot of fear through the community. So, is the community right to be fearful, or is it misplaced fear?
I think I really have two answers to this again, because I don't think it's necessarily misplaced fear. I think AI is going to make a lot of changes to our society, and change is scary. So you look at the film industry, they're one of the first ones through the wall here because of how we're seeing AI be implemented right now, of really seeing the effects that this can have on jobs. We're seeing that with consultancy firms and law firms right now. We're going through the exact same thing, as we're seeing entry-level jobs almost erased overnight. So there is like genuine reason to be concerned, and their fear is real. But one of the reasons I say that we shouldn't be as concerned about AI, or one of the reasons why I think we become so concerned about it, is fear also comes from a feeling of powerlessness, a powerlessness to fight this. And I think the Hollywood unions have shown that they have a bit of a power to, dictate how we're going to deal with this, because the real fear with that, when we think about it, is, it could mean more people creating more movies, more people working in, more directorial roles, all these stuff, that we could make more art. But we all know that's not how it's going to be used. It's going to be used for cost-cutting measures, and people will lose their jobs. And that's what the union fight was about. In their decision, it said, hey, we should still allow AI to be used, but we want to allow it on certain terms, that you can't force writers to use it, but writers could decide to use it. So I think that's interesting there. But I think some of the bigger fears kind of fade away when we understand how it works. And I always use the analogy of, in my earlier career, I was a professional magician. And in magic, we want to hide how our tricks work from you. And we want to hide how they work because as soon as you know how they work, we lose our power. We lose that mystic feeling of, how did he do it? So if I told you how I did it, suddenly you probably will never remember that trick. Suddenly it loses that mystique to it. It's actually quite simple, most magic tricks. They are incredibly simple. And I think with AI, it's the same thing. When you pull back the curtain, when you allow the people to see what's pulling the strings from behind, it is quite understandable at its base level. And when we know how it works, we can start to challenge it, and we can start to challenge these ideas. And I think it makes AI a lot less overwhelming and a lot less scary, and gives us the ability to do what the Hollywood unions do and say, this is how we want to see it implemented.
I'm not a person who's generally afraid of AI, but I am fearful of some of the nefarious people who will use it and how they will use it. How do you alleviate my concerns?
Yeah, I mean, it's a really good question because it's going to be used nefariously, and we're already seeing that right now. And I think a good first step is strong regulation. In the European Union and Colorado, actually, they have the AI Act. And the AI Act cuts down on some of the nefarious uses of it or the misuses of it. And it gives clear regulation on, a lot of uses you don't need to regulate. But as your uses get more dangerous to society, there's heavier regulation put on it. And I think that's a good first step. But that only stops people working within the legal system. It doesn't stop, nefarious uses of it, criminals, people working outside of it. So I think, it's a development, and it's something we're going to have to invest a lot of money into and a lot of time to figure out how we want to deal with this. And unfortunately, I don't have an easy answer to that, but I really hope that our governments meet the moment.
Who did you write the book for? And by that I mean, did you write it for the business community, for people who are perhaps using AI, or were you writing it for the layman who is concerned about AI and what it can and cannot do? Who was your specific reader when you started writing this book?
Yeah, when I started writing this, I kind of started knowing who I didn't want to write it for. And I didn't want to write it for academics, and I didn't want to write it for industry practitioners. So people already in the AI world looking for that extra little piece of information. And I really wanted it to be for my friends and for the everyday person, because I found that the AI information sphere right now is so just clouded. There's just so much stuff. There's so much debris. The fog of war is here. If you go on YouTube, it's every crypto bro turned into an AI bro telling you the 10 GPT prompts you need to know. And if you go to the academic work, it's just so dense that you can't expect your everyday person to read it. So I wanted to read it for anybody who's heard the words AI or heard about these things or heard in the news and is concerned about it or is interested in it, that this could be your starting point. And it's not a manual. It doesn't, it's not super technical in the sense it says, this is what AI is, this is how it works. I decided to write it as a story. So it's written very much in a narrative function, actually following the history of AI and giving you from that history the ability to understand it, because I want it to be something that I know most of us don't have much free time anymore. We're all working hard. And the last thing you want to do is spend that precious free time reading a difficult book. So I wanted to write something that you would look forward to reading, that would be enjoyable. So it really is written for the everyman, for my friends who are plumbers, my friends who are marketing executives, my friends who are politicians, to give anybody that starting point for their journey.
Again, the book is called Artificially Intelligent, The Very Human Story of AI. David, thank you very, very much for taking the time to be on the program with us.
Thank you so much for having me, Peter, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.
David Eliot, author of Artificially Intelligent, The Very Human Story of AI. You can go to our website at thestufffile.com, check out the show number for this program, which is show number 0844, and you'll find the link to David's website, plus links to either Amazon.com or Amazon.ca, where you can order his book directly. You're listening to the Stuff File program with me, Peter Anthony Holder.
Giving you something to think about. This is Morning Shower Thoughts.
They say an asteroid killed all the dinosaurs. You could say it killed many birds with one stone.
Morning Shower Thoughts from the Stuff File program.
Got something for the mailbag? Drop Peter a line. He'd love to hear from you. Send your email to mailbag@thestufffile.com. And remember, stuff is spelled S-T-U-P-H. That's mailbag@thestufffile.com. Or catch up with him on Twitter or Facebook. There's more Stuff File coming your way in just a few moments.
Hey, how would you like to become a patron of the Stuff File program? It's easy to do. By going to patreon.com and becoming a patron, you help to make this show an even bigger and better radio experience. And if you become a regular patron, as a Patreon reward, I'll share with you an electronic version of my book, Great Conversations, my interviews with two men on the moon and a galaxy of stars. You've heard me say on many occasions about the myriad of celebrities I've had the chance to talk to that are contained in my book, which is published by Bear Manor Media. You've also heard me mention that some of the celebrities in my book, and many others, can be heard on our page at patreon.com. If you've been on the fence about joining Patreon, let me try to pull you over to our side. Join Patreon and claim your copy of Great Conversations, my interviews with two men on the moon and a galaxy of stars. Sign up at patreon.com/The Stuff File program.
Coming to you from Canada, a place where fighting is frowned upon, unless it's on an ice rink. This is the Stuff File program with Peter Anthony Holder. Now, the Stuff File presents Andrew Fazekas, the Night Sky Guy. It's radio that's out of this world.
Andrew Fazekas, the Night Sky Guy, is a member of the Royal Astronomical Society of Canada and the author of National Geographic's Backyard Guide to the Night Sky and also National Geographic's Stargazer's Atlas, the ultimate guide to the night sky. And Andrew, before the planned Blue Origin launch last month, we thought about talking about that mission, but because of when we record and when the launch was planned, we worried about a scrubbed mission, which, of course, it was. But now that the launch has been rescheduled for either later in this month or in November, and at press time, we really can't tell which one it is, can we talk about it now?
Yeah, sure, of course. I mean, this is a big mission for Blue Origin. This is, of course, Jeff Bezos' effort, a space effort that he's doing. It's kind of in competition with Elon Musk's SpaceX, I guess. And they are competing for dollars at NASA too. They've snagged their own multi-billion-dollar contracts with NASA, especially to build the lunar landers. But they have a lot of fundamental work to get to. And part of that fundamental work is their rockets that need to be able to have that lifting power to get all that stuff to the moon. Blue Origin has just rolled its second New Glenn rocket, first stage, out to the pad at Cape Canaveral, Florida, and it's preparing for its upcoming flight, which, as you mentioned, we're not quite sure exactly when it's going to be, but we're very close to it. And it's a big mission. It's going to carry NASA's twin ESCAPADE probes to Mars. Basically, these probes are designed to study the atmosphere of Mars and how solar wind interacts. So these are really practical little probes that this new rocket will be pushing out into space. And this is a really big rocket that they do have. New Glenn is about 320 feet tall when fully assembled, and it uses a reusable first stage, exactly the same like what SpaceX's Falcon series rockets are designed. That's been the big game changer in the rocket industry, is reusable first stage boosters. And that lowers, basically, why that's important is that it lowers the cost barrier to getting into space. So this is going to be the New Glenn rocket's second launch. The first one occurred earlier this year, but they failed to land the booster at sea. That was the first one. Hopefully they'll do better this time. And on the same day as the rollout, which was really interesting, Blue Origin also launched 6 people on board their New Shepard suborbital flight. That's their 15th human spaceflight mission for Blue Origin. So they're still well behind SpaceX, but they are catching up slowly. I mean, this rocket though is huge, just like SpaceX. It's like something like measures like a 30-story building, so it's very impressive, and I'm really excited to be able to see that launch.
Do we know why there was a scrub for the previous mission or last month, or have we not been told that yet?
Yeah, what's really interesting with Blue Origin, they really keep things to their sleeve, very much similar to how SpaceX does as well. They don't really go into too much detail, only later on, and they're yet to really go into all the details of what the scrubbing has been about.
Well, the big news from Canada's point of view is that Canada is planning on putting nuclear reactors on the moon.
Yeah, this could be a big game changer for future moon bases. So Canada officially is exploring how the nation can contribute to the idea of having nuclear reactors. So NASA is planning to do this. They're planning to deploy 100 kilowatt reactors on the moon by sometime around the year 2030. And it's to power sustained human missions, they say. Canada is looking to do its own lunar surface reactors, basically to support these future human habitation of the moon, these bases that we want to build. And this is all kind of stemming from, of course, the Artemis mission that NASA has put together. They're kind of, you can think of it as the Apollo program of the 1960s, but on steroids. And it's not about just going there to land and grab some rock samples and come back to Earth. The idea is to build out a station, a station that would be permanently occupied on the south pole of the moon. Now, Canada is a perfect country to be able to do nuclear reactors because it has a long experience with that. You could just think of CANDU reactors, research reactors that they've been involved in. So it makes I think Canada's contribution in this field pretty credible. So we'll see what happens with that. But it's pretty compelling to have this idea of a moon base being able to be powered by nuclear power. We're talking about habitats being powered by nuclear power, scientific instruments, life support systems. Basically, the idea is to run a small town by Earth standards, but on the moon. It could be a game changer in making any colony on the moon self-sufficient.
Well, speaking of the moon, apparently the moon has a split personality.
Yeah, and this is really interesting because this is a new research results coming out from China's Chang'e 6 mission that returned the first ever samples from the moon's far side. So this was a lander that China sent to the far side of the moon, the part of the moon that we can't see from the Earth, because you have to remember that the moon has its face locked towards us, one side eternally, and the other side and that's not facing us. It's been pretty much of a mystery, and there's been very few successful attempts of being able to do a reconnaissance of it. But China managed to do that very recently with the first return samples from the far side, and what they've noticed that it has a thicker crust than the near side. It has a more rugged terrain. We've noticed the terrain itself was very pockmarked with a lot more craters of different sizes. And we've noticed that there's fewer lava plains, much fewer than we see on the near side. And now it looks like the interior of the moon also seems to differ. They've collected basically samples that are estimated to be, get this, 2.8 billion years old. It really looks really interesting because it's very different from the rocks that were collected by the Apollo mission astronauts. It'll be really, really interesting to see how this impacts our understanding of how we could do mining on the moon and getting resources from the moon.
Do we have any idea, any speculation as to why they're different on both sides of the moon? Or is it just too early to tell?
I think it's a little early, but I mean, from our basic understanding of the formation of the solar system and the Earth-Moon system, because one of the the sides is eternally locked towards the Earth, the outer side of the moon may have been exposed to much more bombardment in the early part of their formation. So a lot more asteroids, meteors, comets may have pummeled the far side of the moon much more, thereby creating not just a real, pockmarked side of the moon, but also different chemistry as well.
And finally, you mentioned the idea of mining on the moon. Apparently, there is a brand new, shall we say, gold rush, but it isn't gold. It's actually on the moon, and it's something called helium-3.
Right. So this idea of mining helium-3 has been around for a long time. It's a rare isotope that's on the moon's surface, and many have been proposing mining it as a fuel for future fusion reactors. So we were just talking about this whole idea of setting up nuclear reactors. This kind of really lends itself to that, of having the raw materials to run those kind of nuclear fusion reactors. The soil on the moon contains trace amounts deposited over billions of years by the solar wind. There's this whole idea, could we actually mine it? But there's a big challenge. It's very scarce. You'd have to process very large volumes of the lunar soil to get enough to run a reactor. And you need the right kind of fusion technology, which we don't quite have yet. So this is something for the future. We're not ready to really take advantage of this, but the idea is there. A lot of proponents are saying this could lead to unlimited fuel source for any moon bases there. It probably makes sense if you have a broader lunar infrastructure. So, you're talking about all these components that are involved in building a town on the moon, then it would make sense to mine this helium-3 isotope on the moon. But it's something for the future, and it looks promising.
Well, the one thing I think about with the old gold rush is that, yes, there were gold in them there hills, but the real money was made by all the people who participated in getting gold rushers to the gold. The pickaxes, the shovels, and Levi Strauss came to bear because he created dungarees, which were Levi jeans that became Levi jeans later on, and these were the people who really got rich from the gold rush.
Right. Yeah, it's all the peripheral stuff going around. That main source. Absolutely.
So I'm assuming that there are some companies that are really planning to make it big. And again, not necessarily with helium-3, but with the peripherals as you just described.
Absolutely. But I think to really take advantage of this, we're going to have to see humans on the moon. Even our robotic infrastructures that we could have are not robust enough to really take advantage of this. Maybe, you might get some humanoid robots like Optimus, for instance, that SpaceX is building, Tesla, I should say, of Elon Musk. They're building these humanoid robots, maybe perhaps, but really I think humans are going to really be needed on the moon, working and living there to really take advantage of this resource. And then, as you say, I can see a whole slew of other industries, piggybacking on this effort.
We're just about out of time. As a matter of fact, we are completely out of time. We didn't even get a chance to talk about South Korea planning to build a moon base by 2045. And the last time we were talking, we mentioned helicopters on Mars. But since then, apparently there will be tumbleweeds on Mars. We haven't got a time to talk about any of that right now. But can we go to Patreon and talk about it?
Absolutely. That sounds fun. Let's do it.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Clear skies.
Andrew Fazekas, the night sky guy. You can go to our website at thestufffile.com to the page for this show, which is show number 0844, and you'll find links to Andrew's site to get your own personal autographed copy of his books. Patreon subscribers, you can hear more of Andrew as a Patreon reward extra, where we'll discuss, as mentioned, South Korea's future moon base, tumbleweeds on Mars, plus NASA's plan for a nuclear-powered rocket to Mars, the Hubble telescope captures a star eating a Pluto-like planet, and more. Just go to our Patreon page, and if you're not already a member, become one of the select patrons of the show. Visit patreon.com/The Stuff File Program. And finally, boys and girls, it's that time you've been waiting for. It's time now for the Idiot of the Day.
And now it's time for the strange things adults do. This Stuff File presents the Idiot of the Day.
The California Highway Patrol wasn't impressed by one driver's attempt at creativity on the road. An officer stopped a Nissan Sentra after noticing something unusual about its rear license plate. Instead of the typical California license plate, the driver had crafted a hand-drawn version complete with California lettering, the DMV's website, and a registration sticker. By the way, I've posted the picture of his plate on Stuff File social media. Enjoy. CHP said the driver earned points for creativity but still received a $197 fine citation for driving without valid plates. Under California law, vehicles must display proper state-issued plates. Drivers can request replacements through the DMV for $27 if their plates are lost or stolen. I guess he's lucky that it's just a fine, as opposed to jail time where he might have to make actual license plates. But why, oh why, would he go to all the trouble to make a fake license plate when he could just simply get a replacement for a mere $27? One reason, and one reason only. He's an idiot!
Gee, I'm only a kid, but even I know you're an idiot.
And that's it for this edition of the Stuff File program, number 0844. Hope you enjoyed it. The website is thestufffile.com, and once again, stuff is spelled S-T-U-P-H, where you'll find information and links on all of our guests by going to the weekly Stuff File page. Just look for the corresponding program number, and once again, that's 0844. Email me at peter@thestufffile.com. You can also find me on Facebook, Spoutable, Mastodon, and Blue Sky as PA Holder. Check us out on patreon.com, where you can become a patron of the program. Hope to see you back here for our next show on the air, online, or as a download. We're coming to you from everywhere, including KDXRadio.com, over the air on World FM in New Zealand, WNRHLP FM in Newport Richey, Florida, KZZHLP FM in Eureka, California, CKUW FM in Winnipeg, CFMU in Hamilton, CKLU in Sudbury, Local 107.3 FM in St. John, CHSR in Fredericton, and also streaming on just about any streaming service your little heart desires. That's it. Bye-bye.
You've been listening to the Stuff File program with Peter Anthony Holder, a presentation of Flying Fish Communications. Please remember to practice safe eating. Always use condiments.